Okay, welcome to another episode of Creator Journeys. Delighted to be joined today by Preston Rutherfood. He is the co-founder of the notorious, iconic American brand Chubbies Shorts, as well as the co-founder of Loop Returns. Preston, welcome to the show.
Adam, thanks for having me, man. I'm pumped to be here. It should be a lot of fun.
As you know, I'm a huge fan of your content, and historically, coming from the D2C world, it just resonates with me extremely deeply. And I think I speak for everyone that you just articulate a pain that a lot of people are just floundering on and really just don't see light at the end of the tunnel. But I want to start with, first of all, understanding what is the motive for you sharing this content, publicizing it on LinkedIn, and building your audience this way, because you've obviously been very successful with your previous or current two companies. So my first question is, why document and why build this in public?
Sure, great question. First of all, thank you for all the kind words. I really appreciate it. And first thing to always say about any of this stuff is, I was quote unquote a co-founder. There were other co-founders, and then there was teams, right? So, none of the credit to me as an individual, all to the teams. Especially, well, for both Chubbies and Loop, but especially on Loop because we originally created it as an internal tool and just to solve an internal problem. And I was just one of the many people on the team who really felt that problem and maybe even sort of like had some rough thoughts on what a solution could be. But it was originally built as an internal tool, and there was inbound from other brands around, hey, we would like to use this. And that didn't even cross our mind. So I'll be brief here, but just the general idea that there's a whole separate team, separate from the folks at Chubbies, who built Loop into what it is today, which is just an amazing company. So all credit to them. So that preamble out of the way and all of the things that have to be said in these sorts of contexts. The hope is to, I think there are, to be honest, it's mostly some selfish, some I would say charitable, maybe. So on the selfish side, I really enjoy, or I find release, or it's somewhat therapeutic to process mistakes, to turn mistakes I've made into something that could hopefully be helpful to someone else who is in there trying to do it, trying to create something that people love, right? So that's number one. It is very helpful to to try to do that. I mean, I feel like I get a lot of benefit from it. And not only that, but it's a really big challenge to just sort of try to think something through that is this kind of like nugget of an idea. Because at the end of the day, all I'm saying is brand is important, right? But I'm trying to say it in a zillion different ways. In the same way that building a brand is you're saying one thing 20 zillion times, right? So there are a lot of parallels. Or at least you should be aiming to say one thing a zillion times. I think there's dilution that can happen if you say a million different things because no one knows who you are. Separate topic. And then the other, and I don't think it's charitable necessarily, but it's just to try to help, right? Try to provide some thought or consideration that could hopefully change the way someone thinks about something, maybe help them walk into a meeting that they're dreading with a little bit more confidence or a different perspective, all in service of creating strong brands that people love, that last for a long time, and that can generate profits. I mean, that's, and again, I view the world pretty myopically, largely through consumer brands. So, like, don't fault me for not curing cancer, but I view the world with much more stronger brands as a better world, right? The consumer benefits, the employees of these businesses benefit, everyone benefits, right? The ad platforms benefit, like the whole ecosystem benefits, the whole supply chain. And the pain, though, is real that we all feel, this notion of how do you balance long and short term? How do you measure long term so that you can feel it today rather than just measuring short term? I mean, in a lot of ways, just like measurement and KPIs and goals and making sure those are right are hard. And you only learn it by living it or by ideally hearing from someone else who's lived it, right? So I think from that perspective, it's just like, well, it's kind of I wouldn't say my duty, but it's like, why wouldn't you do something like this? So I think, those are a couple of thoughts going into it. The other is just it's really interesting, right? I mean, any of the content creation I had done in the past was behind the face of Chubbies, right? And it's a little bit scary to put your name on something that you put out there, right? It's you're exposed. So I think from that perspective, just from like a human growth and learning perspective, and challenging some of my imposter syndrome, if you will, is also something that I think is exciting or interesting, or another input or reason for this whole thing. So those are a couple things.
I think there are two amazing points there that I want to call out. And the first one is you mentioned that it's therapeutic. And I've been through this myself and spoke to so many people where there's so much friction when it comes to creating, even if you have a track record of success and you've been successful in your own right, like you have. And I just find that by articulating my methodology or my experiences, even of what I've been through, that just helps give me a lot of closure and also refines a lot of the value proposition and my beliefs. And obviously, you get
Right.
that qualitative feedback from people who say, well, I disagree with this, or I
Right.
completely understand, and then message you privately. And you get all these great
Right.
qualitative signals come through at scale, because obviously LinkedIn or any of the social channels are massive platforms. And I think a lot of people are thinking, well, how many leads can I generate? What's the business benefit? But sometimes you miss those subtleties of just creating to gather feedback on what you're saying to refine that messaging. And then, as you said, you've obviously been very successful and you have imposter syndrome as well. So I think that's a great call out for so many other founders and people who've just lived through a lot of incredible lessons and insights, that just share them and put them out in public, because the benefits of doing so are just massive, and you will build a lot of relationships. And we can come on to this later, but you can validate a lot of ideas for future products as well by building in public.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. One of the lessons from life in general, right, Adam, and you see this, is the amount of people who do compared to the amount of people who want to do is massive, right? So the way from a self-talk perspective, to kind of combat the imposter syndrome is that just do the thing that, because everyone has the same feeling I do. Like we're all unique, but we're all the same. So understanding that, trying to, just at least from a mindset perspective, turn the things that are the worst, that you're most scared of, that you're most worried about, that you hate the most, into the things you love, that you want to run to, right? That turn into business opportunities, right? That turn into company ideas, that turn into ways that you can add value in the world. Because it's not like I'm the only one who has imposter syndrome, right? To your point. Whereas when we feel that feeling, it feels like we're the only one. And why is everyone else so confident? Why is everyone else so certain? And no one is, right? We're all the same. And if someone maybe comes across that way, it's just bullshit. So these are some of the like personal growth things that I've been thinking about somewhat recently. But just
Yep.
echoing your point overall.
Yep, I think you've articulated that extremely well. And it's a nice segue actually onto the next question. And I want to talk specifically about your experience in D2C, because I think there is a lot of parallels in a sort of way with content marketing and my experience working with people. And, in your world, it's always been, and your core message is getting off this direct response drug, right? Of like the meta machine that keeps people addicted, and moving towards more brand building activities. And I think the comparison I see with content creation is people writing directly expecting the same concept of, well, I put this post out, I need to generate leads. And as a result, they lack depth and nuance and conveying a point that actually draws people in and gets them to actually consume the content over the long term. Prime example being a podcast, right? Where someone starts and go, I'm not starting a podcast, only 10 people will listen. But if 10 people listen from minute 1 to minute 50, that's an incredibly rich, intent audience that you're able to capture. And I see a lot of parallels and similarities in the D2C space with switching to brand building activities. So I would love to know, specifically in a D2C context, what was the process like for you from pursuing this strategy for such a long period of time, realizing you had to change course, and then some of the objections that you had to that, or how you eventually had faith in the process and what the learnings were from that?
Yep. Great question. And you said a lot of cool stuff in the lead up. So I'll address those two things first, and then I'll get to the DTC question and the idea of the transition. So the first two things. One, this idea of needing this immediate, like I do the thing, I should get the thing I on the surface want, like the lead. I put out one post, I should get the lead. Not only are those expectations like disconnected from reality, but then it causes you to obviously behave in such a way where it's suboptimal, right? And that's why I am such a proponent of selling in person, because you would never do that in person. You would never walk up to another person without introducing yourself, building some rapport, building a little bit of trust. And you wouldn't just walk up to them and be like, buy my shit right now. You know, you would never do that. You would never like, pay me for something, pay me for my services, right? You would never do that. And that's what we do on the internet sometimes, right? Because we're not looking someone in the face, and we're not accountable, right? Our reputation isn't on the line. I mean, it is when your name's associated, blah, blah, blah. But like in general, right? Especially if you're advertising through a brand, right? You can hide behind that. So that's like a big thing where I'm just sort of like, do the shit in person, and then just replicate it. Don't come digital first from this perspective, right? Because you're going to like jump 15 steps ahead on something you would never do in life, right? And like the classic take this too far example is just like, oh, the good old boys club. They just go out and play golf all the time, and then they do their little backroom deals. That's not what I'm talking about. All I'm talking about is you walk up to a person, you start a relationship, you're not going to sell them anything, or at least you're not going to be super effective doing that, right? Like maybe if you've got like your little table on the side of the road, you'll be like, hey, shorts, and people might come over. And then even still, though, you wouldn't be like, buy them, You'd be like, hey, this is what we do. This is what's cool, right? We'd convey our enthusiasm, right? And we'd have our little, our logo. We'd maybe have some music playing, right? We would attract. We would try to create something that's interesting and worth a person spending their time on. Whereas online, it's like, if we want that, I write the post, I get the lead, or I put out the ad, I get all the purchases. It's just like you're skipping 15 different steps, and it's completely ineffective. And you don't know that, and you don't feel it because you don't feel the pain of the shitty suboptimal things that you do. You just see like, you don't feel apathy, right? But when you're in person and someone's like, meh, you feel that, right? You feel embarrassed. You're like, that was just wrong. That was like a horrible interaction. I need to change, right? And so just either doing everything that you're doing like in an in-person context, even though it feels like unscalable or old-fashioned, you got to do that, because digital first and digital only can lead you to just act like an idiot, basically. That being number one. Number two, podcasts, right? Your point is spot on. The one additional layer I might add is Chubbies had a podcast and, worked at it for a year, and all credit to the guys who were on it. But we killed it because we couldn't quantify how many leads or how many sales it drove, right, directly. And then looking back, we're just sort of like, oh my gosh, that was the wrong decision. And learning those sorts of things, because it's such a slow build, right? Such a slow build. You don't feel it right away. But then to your point, qualitatively, yeah, near 90% of the people I talk to, they're like, yeah, I just looked you up on YouTube, and I spent the weekend listening to some of your podcasts. It's like, that's crazy, right? Because the view count, though, is shit. Like, I don't think any of the podcasts I've been on have 1 million views or even like 10,000 views. It's like a few hundred, maybe less than 100. But those people are people who I want to be talking to, right? The people that matter. That's my podcast point. So then to the actual question that you asked, which was in the realm of this kind of like transition and the brand piece and the, the short term and the long term, I'll just maybe tee it up. I'll try to be concise and then we can take it wherever we want. I think the thing with Chubbies is that, and you hate it at the time, but then it ends up being a benefit, which is sort of like tying to the thing I'd been talking about earlier. But like men's, because we started with like khaki shorts, men's khaki shorts is about as commoditized a product as it gets, right? There's no IP on the product. I have no patent. We have no patents. There's no like product moat necessarily, right? I mean, you could just like take a pair of our shorts, hand it to a pattern maker and say, make this, and they'll make it. And there are a bunch of companies out there that have done exactly that. So it felt like a curse at the time. You're like, shit, man, I'm just like fighting for my survival every day. Anyone could pop up and just do what we're doing better, right? These thoughts happen. But then it also, like, the benefit to flip it 180, the benefit is like, that, right? You're not just going to only rely on the product and just be like, product will sell itself. Not that we didn't have great product, not that there wasn't constant product innovation. And yes, there was a differentiator, which was, it was just a lot shorter, right? And it had a retro vibe to it. Those were two differentiators at the time. But we had to make people want it, right? How do you do that, right? And that was always core. So it's like, we knew we had to do this. We knew we couldn't just like sit back on our laurels and just let the product sell itself. And then I think it's a blessing of having 4 founders, right? I knew nothing about making clothing. Tom knew nothing about making clothing. Kyle knew nothing about making clothing. Only Rainer knew how to make clothes. So it's like, well, what are we going to do, right? And so like, well, okay, we'll figure out the digital marketing thing. We'll figure out how to make this fun, right? We'll do the thing that we're good at or think we're good at or just want to do. And, that kind of created the infrastructure for us to do that. And then the other point is like, we knew we wanted to build a brand. Like that would be the thing that would be of value over time. This idea, right? This thing with value that absolutely connects to the product, but it's enduring, right? It's the idea, right? And that was an understanding and a goal from day one. Now, once you start selling stuff, you start getting some money and you start needing to incorporate some predictability into your business. You have employees, you have investors, you got to make payroll, you've got to make the inventory buys, right? That's when you start making some interesting decisions and where you start maybe prioritizing the wrong things, partially because you have to, but then partially because you're optimizing for short term that are kind of like, oh, I need the meta machine for its flaws and for its benefits. I need it because I can just put $1 in and get 10 out, and then it becomes 9, then it becomes 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.8, 0.9, or excuse me, 0.7, right? It just keeps going. But you don't feel it, right? Because it's not linear. And there are all these other exogenous things that are happening. Oh, 2016 election year, 2020 election year, 2024 election year. And then it's like war or natural disaster, like all these things that are just insane. Timu, and you're like, oh, that's what it is. That's what the problem is, right? It's hard to do like the big data analysis, strip out all of the anomalies, and just be like, oh, yeah, it's just fundamentally getting worse over time. So there's that difficulty. But then what we were very lucky to always have, and what I recommend is like thing number 1 is a content machine internally, and that's what you're so good at. But that's the machine that you need to have in addition to your product machine, because that's the only way you can build a brand. And content is everything. It's stuff you write, it's pictures you put out, right? It's videos you make, it's ideas you come up with, stunts, it's right, all that stuff. That's all content, right? And not everyone has the same capabilities, but you got to be doing it, right? You need the machine, and it needs to be driven off of, to the extent possible, objective metrics. Now, you were mentioning subjective metrics like people DMing, or people like, those are objective too, right? Number of DMs, and you can grade a DM, right? You could do all of this stuff to turn it into to turn it into something that you can actually measure and that you have a feedback loop on. But the thing that we realized when we got to kind of like our midlife crisis, where it was like, holy smokes, we are now in a place where we might go out of business. We can't raise additional venture capital. We have to change the way we operate. It's no longer revenue growth at all costs, or, hey, let's try to break even, but then not, because we would always have trouble forecasting our down season and Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and we'd end up losing money every year and then have to stop paying ourselves and then maybe even ask our employees to maybe like delay pay a little bit, right? Because cash is so thin. Like these are really hard, shitty things, a lot of pain. And we then had to learn, how do we then start to build, true value, not stop doing the direct response stuff. It's not either or. And I don't think that's what anyone's really saying, but that's what I'm really trying to say, which is it's a balance, right? But then it comes to, okay, how do I find the balance? How do I get confident investing in things that don't drive short-term revenue? Even if I'm feeling the pain of the revenue that's coming back when I allocate a dollar is going down, it's still what I know, right? It's something I feel as though I can kind of plan around. Whereas there's this complete unknown around spending a bunch of money to distribute a video, for instance, that doesn't beg for a purchase right away and that doesn't deliver that whatever short-term ROAS, right? That's scary. That's unknown for a lot of us, ourselves included. But that's effectively the change. We just started distributing. There was a lot of stuff, and there was a lot of stuff outside of the marketing team, to be super clear, that helped us kind of like come back from the midlife crisis and become like a sustainably growing, at increasingly profitable margins coming out of that. But at least in our little world, one of the things, just to kind of get tactical, is just starting to boost posts that were effective, right? Just boost Instagram posts, boost TikTok posts, Spark, and throw some of these organic video posts that don't like beg you for a purchase but make you laugh, throw them into our conversion campaigns or conversion ad sets. Start to go broad, but even on Meta, right? Just like optimize on reach. Very basic, small, tiny things. But the only way that was possible is because we had a lot of content and we had the machine. So we could slot this thing into an existing framework, but it just had to be different. And so that's, I think, a big lesson that I would encourage every brand or every personal brand builder, right? Is just make a lot of content and just make sure you're learning the whole time. And make sure you have a machine, whatever it is, like your process. If it's just you, great, have a process, right? If it's a group of people, just make sure, first of all, if you're in a brand, you have those people, you're building those capabilities, and you're doing so in the most inexpensive way possible, because that's how you find leverage. That's how you find scale. It's not $1 million creative agencies, $1 million sort of like production cost, and then blah, 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 right? That's the problem of quote unquote brand marketing that I am against. I am for machines and systems and high velocity and high learning. And I think that, plus just starting to get our content in front of more people, is, if I were to just try to be simplistic, like that's the one thing that I think really led to the change in our business of going from like a money loser, marketing working less and less good, getting less and less profitable, to just sort of like total 180, leading up to the acquisition. And I have no non-public information, but I think like continuing quite nicely today as part of a public company, that's, I think, like the one thing, and it all comes back to content, right?
I love this concept of making a media machine around a brand. And I don't think it matters whether you're in D2C, digital agency, any type of B2B service. It's when things are getting commoditized, like so many of these industries do, what's your differentiator, what's your moat? And you can call it thought leadership or branding or whatever. But for me, it's just reasons to buy and like trust signals and mental availability that you're building away from your core product or service. And I think if you just focus incessantly on competing directly on things that, like you said, can be commoditized, then you're just involved in that race to the bottom. and you're not building long-term assets that enable you to capture that mental mind share as more and more people inevitably just crowd in and try and compete on that.
Yeah, I mean, well said. To your point on like mental and physical availability, for people who haven't like heard those terms before, it's kind of like fancy marketing speak, but all it is like you're in people's minds and then you're available when they want to buy from you, and it's easy to find you, right? And that's it. So like from the perspective of content, when you're putting stuff out that makes people feel good in some way, right? Just feel good, feel something, but then feel good. Um, Powerful, right? And then if you're there frequently enough, right, that's kind of like why velocity matters. There are downsides to velocity, right? If the value isn't there, of course,
Yeah.
like um, caveats to all this stuff. Then yeah, you're doing the 1-2 punch, right? The physical and the mental, and but that's all it is, right? It's like we tend to overcomplicate, right? And we want the quick win, but like nothing worth doing looking back from your deathbed is the quick win. None of it, right? And it's just kind of like, man, let's just provide the best perspective. Not that I'm perfect on this or anything like that, but I just think about myself and I'm just kind of like, huh, I've definitely wanted quick wins before and I've behaved in that way. And I'm like, crap, that is so lame. I'm
Yeah.
embarrassed. And I do not, I want to be proud to tell my daughter, we're talking about our kids, tell my daughter how I did something, what I did, right? How I'm known, and how I was able to persist through the hard times, how I didn't optimize for the short term, right? These are all the things we want to teach our kids, but it's like we don't do so often. We don't do that thing, and um, yeah. So it's just like value, right? Our goal at Chubbies was to be the best piece of content that someone viewed that day, and that's a high bar, right? Because we're competing against your buddies, your family, the the wedding announcement, the new birth announcement, the my company got acquired announcement, but then also memes, right? Just like epic, hilarious, shareable content. And then like celebrities, right? Famous people who are just like, that's fucking awesome. So like we're competing against all of that every day. And it was still our goal to just be better than everyone else's, than everything else that they scrolled. And I don't know if we ever got that at Chubbies. I think we did. But it was that, I think, expectation, that goal that I think helped set us apart, help us rise above the noise, right? Because so often from a content perspective, we can just check the box. I got the post out, right? I'm trying to do 6 posts a week. I got the post out. I'm done. I'm a success. And maybe that's one of your goals, but it's certainly not your metric that matters. That is the definition of a vanity metric, right? And so that is so easy, right? To just put in a little bit more effort there, right? It's not about doing more things, it's about doing the right things. And if you can do the right thing plus the right amount of things, amazing, right? But just to check the box, put something out there. And I'm not perfect, you're not perfect at this, right? We're just talking in terms of ideals. To check the box and just get it out there and it's like, man, that hurts. Like that sucks. That hurts your reputation when you're just like, not valuable. I'm that much more likely to ignore you next time I see your stuff, right? And there's pain associated with that. It goes person, goes for company, right? It's that whole thing. And balance, right? You've got real constraints and the realities of running a business or being a human, right? But like from a goals perspective, can I be the best, most impactful, most valuable thing that someone sees that day? If you're doing that, everything else takes care of itself. Everything else takes care of itself. The revenue, the growth, the leads, you just have options, right? But where you're just like extracting, like withdrawing value constantly, you don't have options, right? And you're going to get shitty customers. They're going to churn, or they're going to buy just because they're customers of your product, not customers of your brand, right? Classic race to the bottom, but I'm just trying to add a little bit of nuance and texture to the idea that's obvious. But when we pair it to our actions, our actual actions, it is surprising how our actions do not match the obvious things, right, that we can talk about on a daily basis. So ideally, one of the takeaways from this conversation, or from for the people listening, is just like audit your actions and make sure they match your ideals, right, and your values. And I think it might be an illuminating exercise, and hopefully helpful, but I could be wrong.
I think it's fantastic how deep you went into so many of those points, and we could probably spend hours going over them. But I love specifically how you called out how you act in person, you wouldn't replicate on that online. And I think that's such a mindset shift because when you think and frame it that way, you do immediately shift how you create and how you add value to the world. And that unlocks a lot of leverage. And I know this term value can have an element of fluff associated with it. But for
Yeah.
me, I'm just in the same wavelength as you on this. It's genuinely trying to be helpful and add value to someone's life so that they come across information or assets that humor them, make them interested, and don't feel like you're trying to extract from them, but give to them instead, and understanding that there is long term compounding benefits of changing your behavior as opposed to, like you said, just constantly thinking, I need to take money from this person. And then you're building a business upon quicksand. So I love how you articulated it and conveyed that point. I think it's just so important for people to understand.
Thanks, man.
And I want to come on to now your content, and we can amalgamate two of these questions that I planned. But for me, you create really deep contextual content based on a lot of those experiences that you shared. And my immediate thought when I look at this is that, wow, you must have spent 2 hours writing this post and you really cared about the topic and you really hope that it's helpful, going back to the value that it provides to the audience. So I'd love to know, just walk me through the process of how much time per week maybe you're spending on content, the ideation framework, if you have one for creating it, or whether it just comes to you on a whim, right? It's like you're going through your day, maybe we're having a conversation now and you think, oh, that's an interesting subject, I'm going to write about that. So just walk me through the overall process of how you approach and create content.
Yeah. I mean, let me just start by saying I wish it was like a 30-minute a day sort of thing, but it's not for me. It's not. And so, yeah, I guess my process is absolutely it's spur of the moment, get the inspiration. I feel something. I'm just like, oh, that clicked for me. This idea clicked for me. If it's clicking for me, it might click for someone else. So let's just try to capture that and really focus in on that for an idea, or for a theme to explore over maybe a few pieces of content. But what's my process? Like if you're looking at my monitor right now, I have like 50. I'm on a Mac, so post-its, right? That just have all these different ideas, and then the lower ones are the ones I'm like, meh, probably kill them. The ones near the top of my desktop are the ones that I feel like, this feels pretty cool. And then I get up early because I don't know, I like waking up early. I like starting the day after my kids get up, and when the traditional workday starts, I like feeling like I'm on offense, and I'm really bad when I feel like I'm on defense. So um, what I have, the thing that seems to be working for me is I get up really early. 3:30 is when I get up, and I have time until 7 a.m. to do whatever I want to do. Not all of it is like super focused, like Alex Hermosi, like I just like am in this closet and I've got my nose thing on and I'm just like slamming caffeine pills. I kind of meander a little bit, right? I kind of just like get a feel for like what I'm feeling and do some reflection, and that look at kind of like the things that I'm thinking about, and then just try to start. Sometimes I've got a few posts that take a little bit longer going, and like maybe it has some video editing component, or it's like a graphic I'm trying to make in Figma, so that maybe takes a little bit of time. But generally just like trying to write something cool. I use hemingwayapp.com to write. It's pretty helpful. It's got like the real-time character counter, and it calls out like poor English, poor grammar, which I often ignore, right? My punctuation's horrible and I'm very conversational in my writing, and that's all intentional, just so it feels like it's coming from a human and not whatever, someone AI generated. And then I always end up, I mean, as you know, like a LinkedIn post, just to use that specific example, has like 3,000 character limit, but it always ends up being like 2,950 or something like that. So then I always end up being at like 4,000 characters. So then I just pop open ChatGPT. Someone recommended Claude's better, but then just go through this process of, hey, I want to strengthen the post. I want a stronger structure. I want things to hit, but I also need to cut 1,300 characters. Like, give me specific examples and give me the character savings. And then I just kind of go through and I'm like, I like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, and then just like that iterative process. And then it seems like it ends at something that's better than what it was. I guess one default is like if it's long, then I could do it as an article, but I'm trying to be. I acknowledge that I tend to be verbose, even with the 3,000. Right? I think people have still said it's too long, but I'm like, I got to balance it with what I think is right and what I think is the right way to convey an idea and what I'm trying to get out there and what I'm proud of. But that's sort of it. And then I have the deadline, 7 a.m. That's when I have to get my baby up. That's when I have to get my daughter up, and I need to start doing dad stuff. So it's kind of nice to just be like on the gun or under the gun, excuse me. And then I like I'm getting really tactical, but I then schedule the post. I've heard people say don't schedule posts, but I do. For like some random number, it's like either like 5:46 p.m. or 5:47 p.m. or 5:48 p.m. Pacific. And again, whether I don't know if it's right, it just feels like that has worked. And then on Saturday, Sunday, it's like at 6:57 a.m. or whatever. And that's kind of like the process. But I also get to talk with a lot of people every day, talking with brand folks, with agency folks, with just people in this general arena, talking generally about brand stuff, brand versus performance, like, or just profitable growth and marketing. And that is awesome, right? That is such a source of ideas, just asking questions. And I talk a lot, so it's a challenge for me to just ask a question and shut up, but it's something I'm working on. But asking questions and just getting on topics and just letting people talk about the things that suck for them or the things that they're wrestling with, then just sparks so many ideas. And then you're by talking to a bunch of people, which we can all do, right? That's why I'm saying this. Talking to a bunch of people, you get then triangulate and you start to get an understanding of like, this is like a unique problem that someone's having, or this is shared. And these are the components of the shared problem that I can talk about, that I can then pair with my experience, my mistakes. And because sometimes you're like, I've been out of the game for a bit. Is this stuff still relevant? And short answer is generally yes. But that's the process.
I love it. Is it the most important thing in your day that you start on, or is it just a case of from that 3:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. block of time, it's just whenever it comes to you, that fleeting motivation, like maybe 5:30, I'm going to write about this is in my head?
I don't know if it's the most important, right? It's the balance, right? If I wasn't doing it, it would be bad. And it's not the only thing. And so the reason I'm saying that is because it likens to any brand, whether it be an individual or whether it be a consumer brand selling stuff, is like the content's the top of the funnel, right? It's the trust builder, it's the mental availability builder. It also serves as some, physical availability for me as the human. But then I'm spending my day on different stuff, and I'm in the early days of building the next company. So I'm just talking with a bunch of folks and learning and asking questions and then getting into spending time like filing tickets, filing bugs on because it's a software product, and talking with the team and all those sorts of things. But particularly as it relates to bringing it back to the funnel, it's like the full funnel approach or the balance, right? If I was only doing content and I wasn't actually like talking to people and kind of like maybe starting to tell them a little bit about what I was doing in a way that is all framed around their needs and it potentially being able to help them make them more money, get them promoted, right? Not around my needs. That, that's effectively mid funnel. I'm not necessarily selling and closing anyone right now because we're, still building the product, but that's how I would liken it. And then yeah, but I can't do the content during the day because there's like all these calls and people talking to me and slacks I'm getting, right? The morning time, and yeah, 5:30 or something like that is like when it's like, okay, I gotta go, I gotta get this done, but there's no distraction, and so that's what works for me. There's this one book called I'm trying to think of it. It's not Writer's Habits. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's like a short book about the processes of all of these famous, most of them I think were writers, right? And just wild, the diversity, but the vast minority were like, yeah, I start at 8 a.m. and I end at 5 p.m. I mean, I know Jerry Seinfeld is very much like that, but he's like maniacal. He locks himself in a room, no phone, just pen and paper. But everyone else was like, yep, I get up at 11 p.m. That's when my day starts. And then I write till 3 a.m. And then that's it. And then I stop. And then all I do is like sit in the bath all day. I think stuff like that was really helpful for me because it's like I can be idiosyncratic. I can have my own weird process. I am weird. I'm not normal. And just be okay with that. Like this is the process that works for me. You find the thing that works for you, and it doesn't have to fit into like a normal definition of like what normal is.
Yeah, I love that. I was listening to a podcast with Naval Ravikant, which I'm sure, a lot of people are familiar with him, especially as he's becoming more and more popular as this like entrepreneurial philosopher as he's
Yes.
recreated himself. But I was hearing him say the other day that for him, motivation on these things is very fleeting. So if something comes to him, he has to act on it immediately. It doesn't matter whether it's 4 a.m. in the morning or 11 p.m. at night.
Mm-hmm.
He can't rest until he at least proactively starts to tackle the problem. And I think that concept is something that a lot of people should just embrace and not feel as though they have to make it so formulaic, as though I wake up at 8 a.m., get my kids to school, and then I have to write my post from 9 till 11. I mean, that can be helpful, definitely. But like you said, a lot of your best ideas can just be fleeting based on talking to people, interacting in
Mm-hmm.
your ecosystem, especially speaking
Mm-hmm.
to customers, people involved in
Mm-hmm.
the space where you'll get a ton of inspiration and ideas can just come to you organically. And that usually results in the best quality content as well, because it just instantly connects with you and you know that you can then articulate that in a way that will resonate with others as well. So I think that's such an important point to call out, is not to box yourself in, but to use
Hmm.
those moments of inspiration to then create.
Yeah, maybe the nuance, because this is again like my whole shtick is machine. So like, and I'm a creature of habit, and I have ADD. So if like I don't have structure, I am all over the place, and I'm accomplishing nothing of value. So like, yes, I'm open to inspiration, but then what's essential is to have the idea capture, right? It's really easy. Like I just use, I don't know if you can see the small notepad, right? And I carry it around with me everywhere. And then I've got that post-it thing I was talking about where it's like instantly it ends up somewhere. And then if I'm jumping on a call or if I'm jumping to dinner with my wife or I'm about to change my little kid's diaper, it's somewhere, right? And so we need that process. That needs to be a part of our machine. And if I didn't have the sort of like, hey, these are the hours dedicated to this, and I was just like, hey, we'll see what calls I have today, and then I'll just kind of like fit it around this content piece, I would never get it done. So it's, and again, everyone's process is different. I acknowledge that, but just make sure it's a machine enough to allow the output you want, right? The result you want, and this is what works for me. And hopefully I'm speaking at least enough about like general frameworks that people can apply while also leaving it flexible enough for it to fit your personality, your life, your energy levels, when you're the most focused. Like I'm focused 3:30 to 7, that is like when I'm locked in, and then the rest of the day is a little bit more free flowing and reactive. So that's what works for me.
Yeah. And I think I speak for both of us and many people that when you have kids, ultimately they start to dictate what that routine will look like and when you
That's
can
right.
actually work. So that's another
That's
challenge
right.
in itself.
Totally.
Would love to finish, man, on just what your advice would be for other people, because if we call a spade, right, like you have previous success that you can anchor a lot of your content around. And if you're telling me that even you deal with imposter syndrome, then I know a lot of people who might not be quote unquote as successful or accomplished may feel the trepidation to post and share themselves. So what would your advice be to these people when it comes to just building that content muscle of getting out there and sharing their experience on a daily basis? And having faith in the process as well, coming back to something that we talked about before of not just thinking, oh, I need to blow up this post and get a million impressions and this shit doesn't work. What would your advice be to these people?
I think it starts with, what would you want as a human, right? What do you desire? What would you want, um, in terms of what you want to produce? Not in terms of like the results you want to get, but like what do you want to see? And so for me, I resonate with stuff that's like, I've always wanted to learn about what people more successful than me, what they've dealt with, how they approach things, how they think, how they dealt with setbacks. Have they had setbacks in general, right? Or has it all been just real success in the reality as they have? So that's what I really love. Like, I thrive off that stuff. I love podcasts and YouTube videos. And I love listening to people who I look up to, who have had massive positive impacts on the world, commercially, non-commercially, whatever. So that's what I like. And I like to consume that content. And so that felt natural for me to just try to do. And yes, I'm blessed that I have had this experience, of which, again, all the credit to all these other people. And again, I'm very lucky. But what are some things? Like, a lot of my posts have nothing to do with me. They're just me doing research, following my passions of learning about other brands and other people who are successful and how they've built brands, and just trying to put that research into something that's focused and just put it out there, right? And that could come from anyone. And so, like, irrespective of your experience, share your passion, share what you're interested in. But it all ties to one very specific thing, right? We have to be known for that one thing. And so I think for me, it's like brand. And if I had one word, and then if it's two words, it's like performance brand. And then maybe if it's three words, it's like balanced performance brand. Maybe four, it's like DTC, yeah, right? I mean, it just kind of like goes out, but you just got to know what the one word, the two word, the three word, the four word is for you, who you are, what you deliver, like what you're responsible for delivering to the people who care about you. So again, it starts with things that you want to consume yourself, because that's authentic, right? No one can take that away from you, and you love it for your own reasons. And there are other people that love it. Maybe they have their own reasons. Maybe they have the same reasons, but that maximizes your chance of success and resonance. Two, just like find the stuff that you think is awesome, other people might think are awesome. And maybe they just like didn't take the next step to act on it. Maybe they didn't pull out the quote that really resonated and then write a quick set of thoughts on it that if someone reads it, it could change their perspective. And that you could be a 12-year-old kid who dropped out of 8th grade, right? There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but like, it doesn't matter who you are. You could do stuff like that. There's infinite access to information on the internet, and so much of it can be helpful to other people, a set of people. So I think those are maybe like the two or three things. I maybe forgot my third point, but the other thing is just like, again, getting back to the idea that like every part of our experience, especially the stuff that sucks and gives us the agitation and that stresses us out, also stress and agitate other people. But so few people act on that and try to take a new perspective and turn it into something that can be valuable to people. So a lot of what I tend to write about is like the tension. I address the tension, and then I try to provide some kind of release in the form of information, a path forward, some kind of solution, right? Like classic tension release. But again, it's just sort of tied to this frustration, the pain, but trying to turn it into something that can be helpful. But it doesn't have to be like an experience you had that ended up being a 9-figure exit. It's just like, I feel like I want to do something bigger in my life, but I'm stuck in this 9 to 5 and I've got kids. Everyone feels that. I feel that. I mean, not that I'm better or whatever. Everyone feels that. And so it's like, well, act on it. Like, make content about that. Share your thoughts, because everyone's going to feel seen because everyone has that thought, right? And they're going to resonate. They're going to be like, yeah, same. Or it's like you're in my mind, right? It's like blah, blah, blah. Like all that stuff where you're just taking that next step to act, to do. And just to the spoils go to the people who take that extra step, you know, and then keep doing it, right? Don't quit, right? Because my first posts were shit. Yours were maybe as well, right? They were meandering, you know, they were all over the place. I didn't know what worked at all. I still don't know, right? But starting to just sort of like it's getting maybe a little bit tighter. But that's hard too, because you're like, well, shit. And do I look like an idiot? And then the thing that I think helped me the most was like, no one sees your shitty posts because they don't get distribution. And I was just like, you tried it. And okay, what did I learn? What did I learn? What did I learn? So, anyways, those are some thoughts, some advice to just be like, yeah, if you haven't had a whatever sexy fancy thing happen in your career, doesn't matter, because you are an N of one, but then you're also just like everyone else. And then if you just take that extra step based upon the things that you love as a human to consume, and then you do that for others, like you find value in it, create that for others. I just don't know how you won't find success there, because again, so few people actually do that thing.
Absolutely, absolutely fantastic advice as well. Ultimately, there's just so much upside and literally no downsides, especially if you're starting from nothing. Because, like you said, you won't get distribution anyway if it's really bad. And if it's really bad, who cares? Because you're refining your value proposition, your beliefs, and you're going back to your opening point. It's like therapy. You're becoming a better person and learning to
Totally.
refine your methodology. So I just see so many benefits going out of that mindset of, well, I need to generate business from this, or I need to generate a
Yeah,
viral post. It's like coming back to this core message of brand building, value, just being a net positive contributor to the world. So I think that's really appropriate to finish on, and really appreciate you sharing that. So it's been fantastic,
yeah.
man. Honestly, learned a huge amount. You've really
Oh,
reconfirmed a lot of beliefs for me personally on this journey with my second company. But I want to give you an opportunity to plug, obviously, your LinkedIn, which I will drop in the show notes. But you also have a newsletter as well. But just tell me directly from yourself, what's the best way for people to get in contact and reach out and find out about what you're doing?
yeah, man. I think just it's probably best just to do one focused thing, and that is just my LinkedIn. Follow me, or just read the post. Don't follow, but hopefully it's helpful, and hopefully you like it. If you don't like it, tell me, comment, message me. But yeah, that would be the one thing. Just Preston shorts emoji Rutherford, and you'll link to it on LinkedIn is the one thing I would say.
Really appreciate your time, mate. Thank you very much for sharing everything today.
Hell yeah, Adam. It was fun. Thanks for doing this.
Cheers.